typical lynching involved a criminal accusation, an arrest, and the assembly of a mob, followed by seizure, physical torment, and murder of the victim. Lynchings were often public spectacles attended by the white community in celebration of white supremacy. Photos of lynchings were often sold as souvenir postcards. Know the issues. White mobs often used dubious criminal accusations to justify lynchings. A common claim used to lynch black men was perceived sexual transgressions against white women. Charges of rape were routinely fabricated. These allegations were used to enforce segregation and advance stereotypes of black men as violent, hypersexual aggressors. Hundreds of black people were lynched based on accusations of other crimes, including murder, arson, robbery, and vagrancy. Many victims of lynchings were murdered without being accused of any crime. They were killed for violating social customs or racial expectations, such as speaking to white people with less respect than what white people believed they were owed. Lynching is American. The term comes from Charles Lynch, who was a justice of the peace in Virginia during the Revolutionary War. A patriot, Lynch encouraged and instructed other patriots to commit extra-legal punishments against those that supported the crown. Lynch's law, as it became known, typically was carried out by mobs that tarred and feathered their victims. The public humiliation not only sent fear through loyalists, it also acted as a way to ensure that others would fall in line and become good patriots, and eventually Americans. At the onset of the 19th century, pro-slavery factions lynched abolitionists that advocated for the immediate abolition of slavery in America. Lynching has never been a legal form of capital punishment like hanging or firing squad. Yet, throughout the country, law enforcement overlooked the actions of angry mobs seeking vengeance for perceived crimes. Throughout America's history, lynching has happened for a variety of reasons. Horse thieves, rapists, murderers, backtalkers, and sometimes people who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time were strung up a tree and left for anyone to see. Mob violence was horrific, and lynchings proved to be a powerful spectacle. From the American Civil War until the last recorded lynching in 1981, thousands of people died as they were strung up a tree, pole, or just strangled for a perceived or real crime. Below is a sampling of 8 kidnappings and lynchings that impacted communities throughout America. William Bill Skeeto, Jr., Methodist minister, December 3, 1864. The lynching of Bill Skeeto has become legend. A native of Spain, Skeeto resided in the southern Alabama town of Newton. His lynching and death over the years has evolved into a popular ghost story. Even why he was lynched and murdered carries some controversy, as facts have been spun into good stories. Some details of Skeeto are undisputed. He lived in Newton and got on the bad side of the Newton Home Guard. When southern states began seceding from the United States of America, not all residents of these states agreed. In Georgia, for example, there were numerous heated and sometimes violent debates on the issue. Voters, only white males who met the requirements to vote, eventually voted to secede. Southern states that had port cities on the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, or on rivers were extremely concerned about how an impending war would impact their trade and profits. Blockading of any port city would dramatically reduce importation of food items that sustain the populace. Despite the massive agricultural output of most southern states, they grew one crop: cotton, which people could not eat to survive. As the armies engaged on the battlefields, some of the most horrific fighting occurred on the home front. Families that supported the Union were targeted as traitors. People that attempted to maintain neutrality were forced either to take the side of Southern resistance or be forced to leave their homes, farms, and assets. Millions of people were violently forced to leave their homes. The violence increased as more and more men fled the Confederate Army at the request of their wives, mothers, and daughters. Skeeto was a large, tall man. He was crossing the Choctawhatchee River when the Home Guard came upon him. Already a well-known person, the Home Guard dragged Skeeto into the woods, where they beat him and then forced him to crawl through the sand along the river. Next, he was dragged to a waiting buggy, where a noose was placed around his neck and the rope thrown over a nearby tree branch. Skeeto was given a last request of prayer. Instead of praying for himself, he prayed for the men who had captured him and put him into the noose. This made the home guard mad, and the horse attached to the buggy was hit. As the men were expecting to see Skeeto dangle by his neck, they realized that they had not considered the man's body size. Skeeto's weight bent the branch, and his feet still touched the ground. To make the hanging successful, men from the home guard began digging a hole so that Skeeto's feet could freely dangle and he would die from the hanging. Lynchings were horrific. In the aftermath of the American Civil War, many in the South were mad. Union forces had destroyed their small farms, white Southern males had lost their right to vote, and the South was divided into 5 military zones. All states that had left the Union were forced to rewrite their constitutions that had to ensure all of the laws established by the federal government. Adding insult to injury, the 15th Amendment had granted universal male suffrage to all citizens, no matter their race, color, or previous condition of servitude. This upended the Southern society, albeit temporarily. In many places in America, African Americans were viewed as the enemy. Some believed that they were the sole reason for the Civil War and all of its devastation. Others believed that they undermined the rights of laborers who were striking to gain better pay, better working conditions, and 40-hour work weeks. Newly arrived Eastern European immigrants viewed African Americans as direct competition for factory and mill jobs. To the immigrant, African Americans were an obstacle in the quest to achieve the American dream. Lynching has been a major component of racial violence in the United States since the end of the Civil War. While Americans of every racial background have been subjected to this violence, a disproportionate number of lynchings have been in the U.S. South, and most of the victims were African American women, men, and children. This page brings together a variety of information on lynchings of blacks in the U.S. It includes an overview of black lynchings by the Equal Justice Initiative titled Lynching in America, which, with its listing of over 4,000 murders, is the most comprehensive report on lynching now available. The page also includes individual descriptions of some of the most horrific lynchings, documents from the campaign to end lynching, and a bibliography of the major works on the subject. Equal Justice Initiative, Lynching in America, Confronting the Legacy of Racial Terror, Major Lynchings, The Lynching of Joe Coe, 1891, Henry Smith, 1893, Lynching of Julia and Frazier Baker, 1898, Joseph Martin Lynching, 1904, Allen Brooks, 1910, Jesse Washington, 1916, Mary Turner Lynching, 1918, the Omaha Courthouse Lynching, 1919, Duluth Lynchings, 1920, Marion, Indiana Lynching, 1930. Eyewitness to Terror, 1931. The Moores Ford Lynching, 1946. Isidore Banks, 1954. Emmett Till, 1955. Charles Mack Parker, 1959. James Byrd Jr., 1998. Lynching, Documenting the Resistance. D.A. Graham, Some Facts About Southern Lynchings, 1899. Ida B. Wells, Lynch Law in America, 1900. Ida B. Wells, Lynching Our National Crime, 1909. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the Long Struggle for Civil Rights in the United States. NAACP Silent Protest Parade, 1917. Dyer Anti-Lynching Bill, 1922. James Herbert Cameron Jr., 1930. The Scottsboro Case, 1931 to 1950. The Scottsboro Boys Trial and Defense Campaign, 1931 to 1937. Distant Whistles, Muted Flutes, Ada Wright in Glasgow, Scotland, 1932. Tuskegee University Records on Lynching, 1881 to 1936, compiled by Monroe Work. The Martinsville Seven, 1949 to 1954. The Civil Rights Congress, 1945 to 1956. Lynching Sites Project of Memphis. These are the ones that were reported. Thousands more are unknown.